The 9/11 Memorial and Museum, in so many different ways, is a physical embodiment of our ability to be resilient, to come together in the aftermath of terrible and tragic events, and to not only rebuild, but to thrive. As Bob said, the memorial, of course, opened on the 10th anniversary, and just a couple updates on numbers. Since we've opened about 3 years ago, we've actually had 15.5 million visitors. They've come from all 50 states and 175 different countries, which is, of course, a pretty huge percentage of all the countries in the world. For the first few years that just the memorial was open, visitors have had the unique opportunity to literally witness on this very sacred ground the rebuilding taking place around them, including most recently the 9/11 Memorial Museum, which opened just 4 months ago. It was dedicated this past May in a ceremony that was led by President Obama and the memorial's chairman, Michael R. Bloomberg. And in just its first 4 months, we've had more than 1 million people visit the museum. In fact, the first week we were open, we decided, as a small tribute to the rescue and recovery workers who toiled on the pile down at Ground Zero for 9 months, as a tribute to them, we kept the museum open for 5 days, 24 hours a day. No general public, just first responders, survivors, and family members. We had 42,000 people come during that period. And for that community, just to have that chance to go down there without the public, you'd see firefighters who were getting off their shifts at 1 o'clock in the morning and be able to walk through the space before it was open to the world was very important for us, not only as the right thing to do, but it also was an acknowledgement that that particular community played such a big role for our country in leading our way ultimately to the rebirth of a site that saw so much pain. On the other side of the spectrum, I think that without question the most meaningful visit to the museum that I got to be a part of was just recently. A man who is known as the shooter, which is the guy who is the second person up the final staircase in Operation Neptune Spear at Osama bin Laden's compound in Abbottabad, wanted to come to the museum, wanted to meet 9/11 family members, and made a decision after his visit to donate his uniform shirt that he wore the night of the operation. And it was just an incredible thing from both sides, from this man's side, he's about 40 years old, for him to return to Ground Zero, where everything that he had been fighting for really started to emanate from. And then to see 9/11 family members, people that had lost their husbands and their sons, to meet the man who shot and killed Osama bin Laden. It was an incredibly emotional meeting. The guys, the SEAL 6 members' father was there. They're from Butte, Montana. And you can imagine, I'm a father, but how the pride that you get to walk around with your son who shot and killed Osama bin Laden. It was an amazing, amazing experience. And it's those kinds of visits, and I think hopefully actually in the next month or so, this man is going to make himself publicly known. His shirt is now in the museum. It's a part of an exhibit that talks about Operation Neptune Spear, all the planning that went in behind it, but it's incredible. We remember people remember the Twin Towers. They remember, of course, the day of 9/11. They remember those towers coming down and that terrible pile with that awful smell that lasted for months. And then they remembered after the cleanup, they remembered an empty pit. And so now to be able to come back to the site and see an 8-acre memorial that's filled with hundreds and hundreds of trees, these 2 waterfalls that are absolutely stunning both during the day and when they're lit at night, to now have the tallest building in the United States complete next to it, and to see the other commercial reconstruction. That's the step in the transformation about resiliency that everyone who's associated with the project have worked so hard to attain. So part of the aspiration of the museum is to remind our leaders, not just the general public, but our leaders who come to this museum and bear the responsibility of protecting the country, how important it is to see firsthand the devastating effects that terrorism has on individual lives. And I think that one of the reasons that 9/11 itself continues to resonate differently than other moments in our history like Pearl Harbor is the idea that all those people, what they did was what we do every day. They simply got up in the morning and they went to work. And that idea that they were who we are is something that is unforgettable. And I think that we really express and want to express this idea of individuality. And one of this quotes we have, it's forged by, I don't think we have a slide for that, right? No, it's okay. You'll have to come see it. It's downtown. We gave steel to a blacksmith, which is still a profession. I was not aware of that prior to this project. We gave steel to a blacksmith, steel that was recovered from the site itself. And he forged this quote from Virgil that says, "No day shall erase you from the memory of time." And it was really important for us, as Bob mentioned, when we start to focus on the lives that were lived. We have an area called In Memoriam, which looks at these individuals as in the lives that they were living. The fact that they were coaches, they were husbands, they were wives, they were family members who lived these very rich lives. It's very easy and natural to focus on the number, nearly 3,000, the scale, the political cost of the event, but it's really also important, equally as important, to remember that it was just, could have been any one of us. And the stories that you hear of, some people were either late that day and didn't make it in. Howard Lutnick, who is on our board of directors, he was the CEO. He is the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, who lost the most employees that day, 658 employees, including his brother and his best friend, Doug Gardner. And he was taking his kid to school. He gets to the towers, and by the time he got there, he's trying to burst into the buildings, and they're preventing anyone from going in at that time because the event was unfolding. But he was late that day because he did something else. There's just as many stories the other way of people that were in town for a conference, a Risk Waters conference, who otherwise weren't supposed to be in the buildings, but just that day happened to be there. So this notion of serendipity, both for the positive and for the negative, just really speaks to the fragility of life and the importance that when tragedy does strike like this, it comes back down to who we are as a people in our DNA to come together to support one another, which hopefully this museum attests to. And I do really encourage, if you haven't been yet, you should go.